Okay, Sutton had just finished their celebration last weekend, and it's Tuesday, July 28th. And I did manage to get out about 5 or 10 minutes of sun. My voice is still not up to normal because, again, I struggle. I'm a senior. What can I say? But I wanted to post two TikToks, and they're from like people that I follow and I watch, and they're quite relevant to like the things that I say in my podcast. Now, the first one will be Brandy Morin, who is an Indigenous investigative reporter. I'd like you to listen to it, and then I'll make comments, and then I'll go to the next podcast.
Did you know that Indigenous women are the fastest growing population in Canada's federal prisons? We're about 5% of the female population in this country, but we make up nearly half of the women locked up in federal custody. In some facilities, it's over 70%, and it's not random. It's not or more criminal or whatever excuse this country wants to reach for. It's colonialism, still doing exactly what it was built to do. Residential schools, broken child welfare systems, poverty, generations of trauma this country has never actually invested in healing. All of it funneling our women straight into cells. And here's the part that most people don't talk about. This is connected to the crisis of our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's the same root causes, the same systems failing us, and sometimes it's the same woman. She survives one thing only to be swallowed by the other. I know this isn't abstract because I lived it. I was 13 years old the first time I went to jail. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story here. I wrote it out in full because it deserves more than 60 seconds. But I'll tell you this, I made it out. So many of our women that I met along the way didn't. And some of them I can still name. Some of them I've had to grieve. This country has known about this crisis for years. Commissions have named it. Inquiries have named it. And the numbers keep climbing anyway. I wrote about my own story, the women I lost, and what's actually being done and what isn't to fix this. It's up now on Indigenous Insider. Links in my bio. Go read it. Hi.
So basically that's like she's a young woman. I'm a senior, but you know, her story is generational, intergenerational. Yes, I lost a lot of friends, relatives. They went through the system, arrested, went to prison. And when they came out, got into addictions. Well, they were in addictions before, and just ended up being murdered on the streets of Vancouver, or just having the bejesus beaten out of them by their partner and left to die. So a lot of this the things that I talk about, and what this young woman is trying to say too, is that it's historical. It's been documented. You know, people keep on reading books about it, and for me, when I have white friends who, you know, they want to be therapists, and I'm going, why? You know, at 65 years old, why? And that's just not Indigenous women, not just white women. There's also Indigenous women, you know, or same age, but wanting to go and get their masters and help. But the reality of it is, and I'll use an example. I have 2 white acquaintances, one female and one male. Both drink, okay? The conversations I have with them, like I said, the female and male, one has boundaries and the other one could have had boundaries but didn't. And as a result of that, the systemic colonial way of thinking, even though she tries to identify with it when I talk to her because she's a white woman, the other fellow, he's European. You know, it's just straight to the point. This is I can take care of myself. So the example was, I was talking to her and she says, my cholesterol's high. And she said, I've been eating right. And I said, well, take the medication. She says, no, my parents took that and I just want to do it natural. Then I said, well, then, and again, when people drink, like they drink maybe four or three glasses of alcohol a week, but the research says that, to totally detox from any kind of alcohol, such as like 4 or 3 or 4 glasses a week for 52 weeks, you have to basically detox and not touch alcohol for at least a whole year. Now, most of the time, when I started wondering about alcohol and addictions because of my parents and adults that I saw, like I said, after in the 60s, I didn't see it. And then when it was allowed to come into community, then I saw it more. I saw more of the violence that, they say, like, there are some things that come out when you're drinking that normally it wouldn't come out if you're sober. So I suggested to her, rather than detoxing for a year, I just said, maybe just stop drinking for 6 months. Okay, obviously it's offended her because it's been going on 2-3 weeks now, and no contact. Now the other person, male, Indigenous, when I'm talking to him about just things, getting to know each other, he says, I can take care of myself. So just in that conversation, I know, like, okay, I don't need to talk anymore about, alcohol with him. It's just straight to the point. Now, in the sense of healing and the colonial constructs and what I think what white privilege fails to understand, especially women. I don't know why, as women, we think this way, or that we don't think that we need to establish boundaries with other women. It's not like homosexuality. It's just common decency about boundaries. I mean, we all have to practice it. It's like conflict resolution. When I was taking this course, the whole point was to practice open-ended questions. When like for me, I know personally, this is my own opinion, I know I have a hard time asking open-ended questions. My questions are usually closed. Well, that means that I'm asking you a question and I want you to answer in a yes or no fashion. Those are closed-ended questions. But with open-ended questions, it evolves, and it evolves a lot of things in terms of intimacy. So I'm going to play this next recording, which is about the deep psychological impact, or even the way in my life, how I've had people label me throughout my life. And so that's why I do my podcast, because when Nathan Chasing Horse did come here, the labeling and the, we'll say, grooming, because like that's what I'm talking about. I talk about my 2 white acquaintances and how they interact with me. Now, the reason I'm going to play this next recording has to do with mental health. And it has to do with just the intergenerational trauma. When I talk about limerence, this is, I want you to listen to this. Again, when I do talk about therapies, I do say, like, in order to eliminate a self-defeating behavior, you have to have guided imagery. You have to have someone, like someone who has those boundaries in place for you. Now, I know this white female acquaintance says, I can't counsel such and such. Yes, you can't, but the reality of it is, like, you have the ability to form boundaries and you didn't. Okay, now the reasoning I'm saying that is because there is some sort of juxtaposition in terms of how white women see Indigenous women. See, men can see Indigenous women in a certain way too, because a lot of times we're eroticized, sexualized. Now, I'm going to play this. Like I said, it's an interesting. It's 3 minutes, and it's called Hypersexuality and Mental Health. So, and the reason I'm doing this is because it's straight to the point. When I talk about therapists and therapy, in eliminating a self-defeating behavior, because this hypersexuality and deals with that whole construct of identity. Now, I don't know if I can hear this, if he can hear it. I don't know why it's not coming through. This is interesting.
Say
okay, hold
subject,
on.
But
Here.
we need
okay, here we go.
And mental health. Hello, I'm Professor Ahmed Hankir. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and today I want to talk about a topic that isn't discussed nearly enough: hypersexuality. It's a taboo subject, but we need to talk about it because for some people it can have profound consequences. Hypersexuality isn't simply having a high sex drive. It refers to sexual thoughts, urges, or behaviors that become difficult to control and begin causing distress, risk, or significant problems in someone's life. One of the best recognized causes is bipolar disorder. During manic or hypomanic episodes, changes in brain function can lead to increased reward seeking, reduced inhibition, impulsivity, and overconfidence. For some people, this can result in a sudden surge in sexual desire and risky sexual behavior. This might include multiple sexual partners, sex with strangers, compulsive pornography use, compulsive masturbation, spending excessive amounts of money on sexual services, or crossing personal or relationship boundaries. Hypersexuality can also occur in some people with ADHD, certain personality disorders, substance use disorders, and some neurological conditions. Hypersexuality can affect anyone. However, in a disinhibited state, some individuals may become more vulnerable to coercion, exploitation, trauma, or sexual assault. When the episode or period of dysregulation passes, many people are left carrying immense shame, embarrassment, guilt, or confusion. Relationships can break down, careers can be damaged. There may also be risks such as sexually transmitted infections, unplanned pregnancies, financial difficulties, or legal consequences. It's important to say this clearly. Understanding the role of mental illness does not excuse harmful behavior or remove personal responsibility, but it does help us understand why these experiences occur and how we can support recovery without shame or stigma. Treatment depends on the underlying cause. For bipolar disorder, mood stabilizers can be highly effective. Psychological therapies can also help people develop insight, improve impulse control, and reduce risk. If you recognize yourself or someone you love in what I've described, please don't suffer in silence. Honest conversations with a mental health professional can be life-changing. Hypersexuality can sometimes be a symptom of an underlying mental health condition rather than a reflection of someone's values or character. Let's replace shame with understanding, stigma with compassion, and silence with honest conversation. I hope you found that helpful. As always, protect your minds and protect your hearts. And bye for now.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to play that is the hypersexuality from my own personal experience and just how people perceive me is very important because, like he said, honest conversation. And again, you have to have like a therapist who has basically studied this. When I went to university, I had a difficult time dealing with like my academics, and I started thinking, why is it when somebody gets an A and I've struggled so hard? Well, obviously there are a number of factors with this, but the reason I want to go back to hypersexuality is that like the two individuals that I talk about when I first entered to this podcast, one male and one female, is that I'll use a friend of mine. She's Japanese American. I've known her for 30 years. She lives in California, and she took care of her mother for 17 years, and her mother was 97 when she passed away. So, like with the aging brain, and for me as an elder, and when I talk to other Indigenous women or just women in general about our sexual desires or our sexual needs, I think a lot of times people just want to make us invisible. And and again, when we were younger, it was a lot easier for people who didn't understand culture or didn't want to look at the poverty behind Indigenous girls, or like were poorly educated or poorly socialized. That's the stigma, because again, I have more respect for this white man than I do for this white woman, because at least he said, I can take care of myself. Whereas for her, it's just like, I'm ghosted now. And throughout my life, like I said, being an Indigenous female, it was a lot easier to be classified as hypersexual. And I didn't understand that, just the way people looked at me, like, but yet, like, when I was talking to this white man, I said to him, when I was younger, I was promiscuous, and then he says, "Oh, you broke hearts," and I said to him, "No, this was a typical local agreement. Meet a guy, we pick, one night stand, wham bang, thank you, goodbye, never seeing them again." I said, that was my private life. Nobody knew. Nobody knows anything about how many partners I've had. Nothing. And I'm explaining this to this white man. Now, I've explained this to this white woman too, but there's a difference. There is a definite difference because, again, boundaries. And I'm not saying that I have homosexual tendencies. I'm just saying that with women, when it comes to talking about sexuality, sometimes it's a reflection on their own insecurities. So that's why I'm saying my white female friend has insecurities, whereas the white man, yes, he has insecurities, but he has boundaries. So having conversations with a man about that was an exercise for me. And like I said, my Japanese American friend who looked after her mother, I'll use an example. Like, I became friends with this white woman during the pandemic, and a lot of times when we talk, it would be about seniors, like in nursing homes, where there was a high rate of sexually transmitted diseases, and the wonder is like, oh my goodness, like as we age, how for me it was interesting. How would I behave when I become older around somebody that I'm attracted to? And so this white woman and I had discussions about what happens in these nursing homes, and there were a couple of stories where the adult children put their parents into a nursing home, and the children were surprised that their mother became very promiscuous and started sleeping around with the men within the nursing home. That they just couldn't believe that was their mother. Okay, but I'm saying, too, like it has to do with how women throughout their life, like I said, every 10 years we change our identities and how we evolve to who we are by the time we were elderly. Another example was there was an elderly man. His son was called in, and they told their son, "Well, we have a problem with your father." He was in the dining room, and he got up and he yelled to everybody in the dining room, "I need to have sex." And the solution for that was they got him an iPad and they put it on pornography, and that settled him. So those types of observations, especially with the aging mind, and again because of hormones and how people throughout their lives handled things. So for me, I try and say to people, I haven't had children, so those hormones and that instinct to mother, I've never experienced that. I've never had the urge to have children, because it seems like once a woman delivers a baby, that whole hormone activity of losing yourself within that child for 5 years, rebuilding your body and your psyche, like I've never experienced that. So for me, even when I can see, like, when I'm a senior in a nursing home, if knock on wood, that I do need to talk about things, healthy human sexuality, because again, we don't know what life has in store for us, and for me, part of understanding who I am has a lot to do with lateral violence, and I think that's why my white female friend just didn't have boundaries with me, and that's the key thing here when I talk about mental health workers, social workers, people who are not Indigenous, who well, say doctors, lawyers, mayors, and presidents. Like my friend in California and her 97-year-old mother, she was saying to me, I have such a hard time getting her to do physiotherapy. Arguing, like dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever. It was just a chore to get her mother to do a little bit of exercise every day. So I was doing a video conference call with her, and she said to me, Marina, do you see my mom in the background? Sure enough, I saw her mother, 97 years old, walking in the hallway back and forth, into the living room and back into the kitchen. She says, Marina, look at how active she is. She won't do that for me. She says, you know why she's doing that? Because her physiotherapist came here and he's a handsome young man. And so I reflect on that in terms of, as we age, when we see someone that we're attracted to that sexually arouses us, we can't turn it off. And for me, when I'm around men and they have boundaries, then at least I know, like, they respect me. Because it's one thing for me to sort of like to say, like, they know that I find them attractive, but it's not a question of my being promiscuous. And so, because again, that label was 50 years ago, but it's the change or the evolution of how outsiders, will say the voyeur or the colonists, look at Indigenous women. So, for example, like my Japanese friend, I met her in Utah. And again, too, because I was being sexualized and the pressure to not be sexual, because this is a Mormon community. And the rigidity of, you have to get married in the Mormon temple. You have to go on a mission, like la-di-da. The pressure was so great. And I used the excuse that I like this football player, and because it's a normal behavior when you're infatuated with someone. And I thought if I had him as my narrative, they would back off and leave me alone, trying to set me up or get me to date like them, or find a husband, like, as a conversation piece, because there were certain taboos you couldn't talk about in that kind of a cult environment. That's how I met my friend in California. So when I talked to her about the fact that I was very happy to have seen how her mother at 97 was still a sexual human being. And again, this white man that I'm talking about with boundaries, consistently saying, I have a wife. And for, a couple of years, 3 years, like, the boundaries were in place. So anytime there was things that I believe that he needed to put boundaries down, it was this dance of intimacy where I knew those were boundaries. And so, like, with my white female friend, the whole part of her just struggling to make things and have like some independence, it sort of like for me, I've gone through so many friends, throughout my life. And then I have friends who I've known for 30 years. I have friends from childhood. And then I have newfound friends as well. So I've really been due diligent when it comes to socializing. And so this white man says to me, "You're quite active. You're more active than my parents." Well, because I've had to do all these social constructs of intimacy with people, because I'm alone. Now, why is this so important when it comes to hypersexuality? Well, again, because I've been around a lot of older women than myself who were hypersexual, but without boundaries, like from healthy men, the dance of intimacy and boundaries, they haven't practiced it, and so this infatuation becomes limerent, and it's this hypersexuality that's limerent based on whatever psychological or physiological problem the individual has is multi-complex. That's why you have this psychiatrist talking about this is a taboo issue, but we need to talk about it. And that's the origin, too, of people looking at Indigenous women, girls, older, middle age, and even elderly, as hypersexual. Because this is my concept, this is my opinion. The reason for that is if that were not the case, this white woman who I hoped she wanted to know, she was talking about what is it that can lower her cholesterol. And I said, just take a break from drinking alcohol for 6 months and see if that's what's prompting this, what do you call the cholesterol to increase in your system. Boundaries. She just ghosted me. And so she introduced me to a friend of hers that she stays with, and they were talking about their youth, like how promiscuous they were. And for me, promiscuity as an Indigenous woman, you sort of get classified as being hypersexual and having all this mental health problems. Whereas with white women, it's not seen that way. But yet now when they're elderly, there's conversations that need to be said, because again, we're, as human beings, male and female, we cannot shut off who we're attracted to. Even when you're in a committed relationship, the boundaries that you set in place when you meet someone you're attracted to is you just say, I'm married, or I have a partner, I'm involved. Boundaries are important. Now, even in hypersexuality and the manipulation and the bullying or the gaslighting, all these psychological terms of deviant behavior, and I shouldn't say deviant behavior, self-defeating behavior is more appropriate because the hypersexuality creates a self-defeating behavior when it comes to the central nervous system. So, for example, and I think I've reiterated this in my previous podcast, was that when if you give up for 3 months, if you give up, what's the first one? Gambling, we'll say, and say you give up pornography and you give up eating junk food for 3 months, like you slowly wean yourself off and you give it up for 3 months. Your nervous system starts balancing out. I mean, it seems so simple, but because we've had this central nervous system in place for decades, or sometimes we've evolved. And this is the critical thing here. That's why I want people to listen to this. For me, I'm 74. I haven't been sexually active for 49 years, going on 50 years this coming October. Any kind of sexual deviancy or any kind of self-defeating behavior, anything to do with hypersexuality, hey, how many years? Don't classify me or stereotype me or put me in a box of hypersexuality. See, and that's the danger, because this white woman and her friend, and I don't know who else she's talked to, have put me in there. And these women are academic. There was a friend of hers who's a professor, and her husband died. Patriarchy. And she's so, she's got anxiety, she's afraid of being alone, and she's going to die alone. That's the same connection that I had with this white woman when the pandemic came, what's going to happen? You know, if I die in this apartment, who's going to find me? And so we had conversation about living alone. Now, I'm not her therapist. I'm just being myself. And again, too, I'm learning about boundaries as well. That's why I'm doing this podcast. So the reality of it is, like with all human beings, male or female, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, whatever sexual orientation nouns that you call yourself, boundaries exist in every level. So, the reality of it is that, you know, when a woman chooses to have children or chooses not to, and how they engage every 10 years in their life, whether or not they want to remain sexual, like it's a really interesting dichotomy or cross-section, we'll call it like an autopsy of deconstructing our sexual lineage. Individuals, self-reflection, like as much as this white woman wants to be a therapist, the whole nature that she's offended because I brought up a cognitive solution that she could either take or not take. But if it triggered her, like it triggered this white man, all she had to say was, "I can take care of myself," and I would have just dropped it. But no, there had to be some convoluted understanding of why it was so offensive for me as an Indigenous elderly woman, giving her, you know, a solution that I thought might be interesting for her to test out because she didn't want to have any medication. So, you know, people self-soothe with alcohol. They think it's, you know, like again, central nervous system. If you want to balance your central nervous system, then you need to slowly wean yourself off of things that your central nervous system has been attached to. And when you're doing hypersexuality and you choose to be promiscuous from like a teenager to young adult to middle, like as you grow and you're still promiscuous, it is a bit concerning in the sense that you haven't done that autopsy on your own sexual identity and your own sexual needs and your own self-respect in how you talk to another human being about what life means to you. Like and again, I apologize to my podcast listeners because, you know, for years I just chose to just, you know, like not really deal with the probability or the concept that I could become sexual anytime. Now, as I'm aging, okay, and I hear all these stories about elderly people in nursing homes, you know, this is concerning as for me as an individual. And so this white man that came into my life about 3 years ago, at the time I was dealing with this attraction. I had known a fellow for 30 years, and again, you know, it just bothered me that he was, again, these boundaries or lack of boundaries. He was separating from his partner who he'd been with for 35 years, and I just thought, what is it that he sees in me? And again, there was a lot of things that he kept secret, but yet when it came time for me to become public about what I had been doing for 20 years, he wanted to be a part of that. He wanted to have his name in newsprint or be interviewed. And it really bothered me that you know, in the Colonial set, I was nothing until this issue of Nathan Chasing Horse came up. All of a sudden, here's this white man saying, "I'm here." And the same with my white therapist or my, you know, just people in general that were not Indigenous, and some Indigenous too. And it really struck a chord with me because I've never had that type of attention before. But it was a false attention. And I knew that. I knew I had to put boundaries down. And even like in March and April, when I said I went down to Las Vegas, I didn't want anybody to know that I was going down there. Again, this whole psychology of hypersexuality, the lateral violence of putting me in a label that this woman was hypersexual when she was, in her late teens, and the lateral violence of keeping me in that loop. It's hard for me to be seen. And the reason I do this podcast and I talk about this white man with boundaries is because he saw me. It's at the same time too. I made no there was no pretense that like he's just like I'm going to treat him like my son or my neighbor or my boss, or there was no. It was just man and woman talking, and sure. He reminded me of some of my former I shouldn't say some, but what I'm trying to get at is I was open. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm too old to be sexually active. I was open, and the reality is, like I said, through the times we had conversation, there was always clear boundaries. I'm in a relationship. So it was quite evident, but yet I had to. I really needed to talk to him, and the fact that he saw me and he had some closure in Las Vegas with this case. And now, when I talk to other women, non-Indigenous women or even women, and I talk to them about this lack of boundary, the majority of women say, "Well, Marina, we have friends, and then they leave out of our life." And I said, yes, my whole life I've had that. I've had close friends, and then they're no longer there. There's just a select few that I've known my whole life, or I've reconnected, and will still connect with them. But the one saving, I think, the one saving grace of this whole damn dynamics is family. So even if your siblings treat you like shit, they're still your siblings. They're still going to grieve over you when you pass. Even no matter what, that central nervous system is set up in place in our very psyche. So as we age and as the decades go by, it's the challenge of how we've dealt with our central nervous system. So that's why, for me, as an Indigenous woman, I find it very colonial that white women would sooner look at me as if my central nervous system hasn't ever changed, or that this part of hypersexuality has lingered in my sexual life my whole life, and the notion that I will always be this vulnerable, exotic, not like sexual human being, but yet, I'm going, yes, I choose to be honest about my sexual feelings. I've suppressed them because of just the being on guard, always like being ready to be attacked, and I didn't want that when I went down to Las Vegas. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want people to be attacking me, like just whatever way they thought, just to pick my brain. I wanted everything, not like I didn't want to deal with that. I just wanted that feeling of like, okay, when I was hypersexual, nobody knew my business. And the reality of it is that from that childhood memory, 49 years ago, it started off 55 years ago to 49. That's 6 years of my life. 6 years of my life. And for a white woman or white man to not see me, or like what I'm trying to say is, in my community, the young men know me. The young women know me. At least some of them know me. And even then too, it's not a question of them asking. It's a question of respect and boundaries. And throughout my life, even as people have tried to hurt me within my community, I see how their lives have turned out now that they're older. And I'm grateful to the path of that I've taken. But yet at the same time too, I'm also always on the alert that I'm going to have to be guarded. But for a brief period, like I said, in March and April, I let my guard down. I totally relaxed. And because of that, I enjoyed my trip in Las Vegas. As hard as it was, I enjoyed my trip. Meeting people, talking to people, having closure with people. And I know when I talk about this to other people who have just recently met me, and they thank me for sharing this story with them, because there's so much intergenerational trauma, especially with Indigenous females, that I think white women cannot even comprehend. Because whether or not they would truly want to admit it, they still treat me this way. No boundaries. If you respected me and you didn't see me as a hypersexual elder, you would have put down boundaries and said, I can look after myself. But you didn't. See, the white man did. As long as I've met him, always boundaries in text, in conversations on the phone, and I try to say that there is a lesson that there are good men out there, and like I was so scared, like 33 years ago or so, when I took the man who sexually assaulted me, a friend of mine who's passed away since. She did a lot of volunteer work with me, and she'd come and visit my family, and we just did a lot of things together. And there was no convoluted stuff happening. And she said to me, Marina, once you do this, you'll say, why didn't I do this sooner? And that's what the gift I gave to Lynette and Sierra, with blanket and with prayer, was that at some point they would have this epiphany that they've done something. They've faced the person who instilled fear in them. And for however long they held that fear, it's no longer there. And anybody who wants to look at them as hypersexual, sexualized, it doesn't matter, because that shadow, that limerence, that cloud has dissipated. That mental health and the courage to eliminate a self-defeating behavior is part of the reward to say. Now, even though I'm talking about this as something that happened to me 30 years ago, this forensic psychologist that I've known, not my therapist, I can face that. I can say, yeah, no, I suppressed my sexual feelings for 30 years. Like, even though I went to court, I knew that, like my friend said, she said, and the analogy is like, I didn't want to have my life every day when I'd meet a stranger, a man, especially a man, that I would fear that all men are the same. So, 30 years of interacting with men and again, trusting men, especially white men. Like the white man who I went with to Las Vegas, I'd off the cuff say, you're damn lucky I have white uncles. But that's an analogy that, the work that I did from the time that I went to court and to eliminating a self-defeating behavior, to understand the self-defeating behavior, the different levels of it. Again, when I talk about hypersexuality, I haven't been sexually active, like I said, in 49, 50 years. So it's the deconstruction of a psychological imprint that people in my community or society places on women. That's why, for me, it's so important for curriculum development for Indigenous teenagers, young women, older women, in what colonial mindsets and constructs have created in terms of murdered and missing Indigenous women, and why this hypersexuality has been a key in using that whole labeling as like an excuse to hunt us and to kill us. Because my goodness, we're not intelligent enough to be non hypersexual. When it's okay for white women to be hypersexual or white men. See, I'm not criticizing all white women. I'm just critiquing and saying they're, well, I'll use Danielle Smith in her analogy or her allegory of the chiefs and the chiefs of Alberta to check themselves. Well, for me, when it comes to white women, and symbolically they're telling me to check myself, and I'm going, no, I don't need you to tell me to check myself. See, ghosting me is the analogy of you saying to me, I need to check myself. The white man that I went with to Las Vegas, we both agreed there was closure. And the reality of him respecting me and validating things that I didn't even know that I did, that I really needed to own. I didn't know that because I was so guarded about protecting my own ego, my own sexual identity that I didn't realize that he was, these boundaries were teaching me a lesson about who I am as an Indigenous woman. So for me, that's the key ingredient here with Indigenous women, is the reality that you can heal yourself, but it's a dance of intimacy with whatever sexual partner you associate with, because it's important. It's important to understand boundaries. It's also important for you as the victim to understand that you're worth being loved, and that part of love doesn't mean that you're going to beat up your partner or that partner is going to beat you up. That hypersexuality and that sexual drive, that's normal. But when you incorporate violence and deviant behavior like brutality and violence, then it's scary. And because of that, I think people who aren't from our culture, white women, tend to look at it like, oh my goodness. Yet they themselves have been in the most dangerous position their entire lives, but they haven't seen it, and they never will see it, because there's still that privilege that allows them to look at somebody like it's like a God complex. Like I said, people have got to really put boundaries down. I mean, it's important for me to meet people and to ask questions. Like I said, open-ended questions rather than closed questions. And so the practice of having a dialogue is important. So this white woman, when I had talked to her about how I felt about this white man, it was important. It was important for me to talk to her. And the reality of it is just like my friend's mother, the 97-year-old. I was saying to my friend Diane, I said, I am so grateful to have seen your mom still be a sexual human being at 97. For her physiotherapist to honor her at 97 by being friendly to her, engaging with her, talking to her, because it made her feel like a human being, a young sexual human being at 97. So for the white man who traveled with me to Las Vegas, doing this for me for the past 3 years was vital. And I really appreciate the experience and the validation. And that's what part of the whole podcast is the reality that my story has meaning. just like this Brandy Moore talking about, she was arrested at 13. Like the whole dynamics of people and how they struggle, and the social construct that creates a society that is fear-mongering, because it's so easy to label all Indigenous females as hypersexual. And of course, hypersexuality comes as intergenerational trauma. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying it does exist. I'm saying I've dealt with my self-defeating behavior. It's something you have to talk about. You have to give it a name. And you have to understand, too, that behavior doesn't carry with you forever. It doesn't. And like I said, 49 years, 50 years. How dare other women question me in my thinking I'm hypersexual, or that, like, how dare I even make a comment about their behavior when I'm hypersexual? Because to me, that's a colonial construct. It's a subconscious construct that this white woman doesn't even know she's projected on me. But you know what? I've had all these years talking with forensic psychologists, social workers, therapists, studying psychology. No, you can, that's the reality of it. Whatever I do in terms of my mental health and calling out people, even if they don't want to be called out, I'm putting it on my podcast. It's a dangerous society that we live in when we have people of privilege thinking that, okay, this happened to me as a child. Yes, but you also have the audacity to think that whatever this Indigenous person is doing, just because I'm not a professor at a university, or I'm not a millionaire, like whatever status white society sees me as a woman. I mean, I know all women are struggling, but I am just saying that it's a lot harder for white women to see women of color. Whatever color our skin is, it's very difficult for them to let go, because it means you're going to be all by yourself. I know I made a comment to her about her friend who she lost her husband, and I said, I made a comment. I said, I think if she tries to find a partner, that because she's so vulnerable in her grief, that she's going to find someone who is going to abuse her. And of course, she stood up for her friend. But I'll use an example. The forensic person that I knew for over 30 years, his daughter has, I think, 68 followers or something on Instagram or her podcast. Her partner, I think they were sexual for 5 years. They knew each other from high school, and then he passed away, I think last year. And since then, her popularity on TikTok has bloomed. She was even in, I think, a New York People magazine, like even GoFundMe. Like all these white women and her white audience just gravitated to her grief. Like, wouldn't that be nice if they did that for murdered and missing Indigenous women? But there's some sort of addiction to the heroine, the lady in distress, the damsel in distress. When I talk about finding balance in your central nervous system, I said, I use the example of gambling, pornography, and fast foods. Three behaviors that you, as an individual, to regulate your boundaries by slowly eliminating those for 3 months, so your central nervous system gets balanced. Well, it's the same thing too when somebody grieves. We had a death, and even you can listen to your own heart when someone in your family has died. and how you remember how you felt during the time you were preparing to bury them. See, this young man, well, he's not a young man. For me, he's a couple of years younger than me. When he passed away, always respectful of me, his children, family. Like, you know, I couldn't go to his funeral because of the smoke. And I wanted to. But when one of his relatives called me and she says, Marina, I was there and I hugged them. She says, their bodies were just so hot. She says, just holding them, I could just feel this radiating heat from their bodies. And I said, that's their central nervous system kicking in because they're in shock that someone they loved has died. I said, that's our central nervous system. This is why it's important to regulate your central nervous system, because you don't know when death is going to come to someone you love. And how are you going to prepare yourself? Because there'll be somebody, especially if you're an Indigenous elder woman, there is always someone, a child or a grandchild, someone in your family that's depending on you. And so you have to take care of your central nervous system. You have to set aside self-care. My friend in Edmonton is doing just that. And it's important. It's an important validation because people are depending on us. There is a Sioux song that it's a traditional Sioux song, and in the song it talks about people like guarding yourself because people are depending on you, and so with that you have to look after yourself. You have to really decide what behaviors do you need to just eliminate. And I know this is going to be triggering, but I'm going to say it because I use it as an analogy with what Brandy Morin was talking about in terms of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls or people. When the average age for human trafficking is 14, when our children are being groomed and they're being taken, the people who do the most, the people who do the grooming, 60% of them are female. So, what happens? And this is like the thing is like for 4 days they will lock the child in a room and have people go in there for hours and hours and just have sex with these children for 4 days. Their body temperature rises because their central nervous system has been under attack. So again, after the fourth day and this grueling 4 days of your body temperature being that high, because like understand, even when someone passes and you get this extreme headaches, again, that's because your central nervous system has been under attack. So after the fifth day, they put the child they put them in a room for the bodies to cool down, and if the body does not cool down, then what happens is they die. But if their body has cooled down, then they're ready to have multiple sexual partners in a day. So this central nervous system and finding balance is important. And it's vitally important, too, when people understand soldiers who go to war and how their central nervous system has totally been bastardized, and the need to find some balance, like to have support groups and places, like things in place. And when you're a child and you've been traumatized in Indian residential school, like I said, the generations, my parents' age, my grandparents' age, that went and tried to create curriculum through Nietzsche Institute and society, taking the funding away because they said it's a federal jurisdiction, or like they want to privatize the health system in Alberta. Certain things like you don't really think about until, like I said, until like when you're looking about, well, Oh, I don't know anybody. I'm not associated with people who are trafficked. Yes, you 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 are, you are, even if you don't really want to admit it. It's just part of the whole nature of trying to control women. Now, if I can find this song, this is a song that the Sioux women have been singing for decades, and it has to do with looking after our central nervous system because people are depending on us. And so, I hope that helps, because if I can find this song, I'll play it for you. I don't normally do this, but it just seems like I'm meant to do this. Again, too, I hope people who are investigating and trying to understand how you can help in eliminating this whole 500 years of hunting Indigenous women and children. Like, that's the reality. And I praise all these young influencers on TikTok and social media for putting themselves on the line and trying to get this information out. So now I'm not sure. There are different songs. And I don't want to stop the recording, because it just means I'll have to edit, and that's, for me, I'm not that good of a guru when it comes to editing my podcasts. And if I can't find it, well, I'm sorry. That's I'm sorry. I usually had everything all put up in the first place. Well, let me try this one. Let's see if it's. Okay, here it is. Here's another one. Hey, yeah, 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 hey, 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 yeah, hey, 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 yeah, oh, yeah, hey. Akaki, many a creature. We are, yeah, hey, hey, we are, yeah, hey, hey, we are, yeah, hey, we are, yeah, hey, hey, let go, we go, we are, key, I keep you, my Nieo Pileataya Wichi Chage Chaya Oya Tigi Haya Wachini Ampeo Kichimapaya Nieo Pileataya Wichi Chage Chaya Hoya Digi Haya Wachi Neampeo So that's it's rare that you will ever catch me singing, but some of the first two chords or the two sentences, they've been changed slightly from what I understood. But it's a woman's song that's talking about never giving up because people are depending on you, and that's a matriarchal system. So again, the formula for just finding balance with your central nervous system is vital. But it means that you have to be open to who you're attracted to. You need to validate that within your sexual identity. You cannot suppress it. And at the same time, the boundaries that you put in place needs to be reciprocated from the person that you're attracted to. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because, again, there are so many murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. I will play this. Like I said, the I think I've got her down here, or do I? Actually, I may not. Okay, I will play this woman's, again, her name is Brandy Morin, and she's a young Indigenous investigative reporter, and her insight into what's happening in the United States, we'll call it Indian country, and in Canada, we'll call it with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. Now, I want you to understand, too, it's only been in the past 2 years that the Canadian government has recognized the 9 Sioux tribes in Canada as being Indigenous. It's only been in the past 2 years that Canadian government has recognized Inuit and Métis as being Indigenous as well. So this whole construct, when it comes to like what the law is and who is Indigenous and who isn't, all these changes are taking place. And it's vital that those people, especially young people who seem to be lost in their identity, need to understand exactly what's going on. And even when you do, you need to have patience with those elders who live and have never left First Nations, Inuit, or Métis communities, that this is their security. This is something that their central nervous system has attached itself. So I'll play Brandy Morin's.
Did you know that Indigenous women are the fastest growing population in Canada's federal prisons? We're about 5% of the female population in this country, but we make up nearly half of the women locked up in federal custody. In some facilities, it's over 70%, and it's not random. It's not because we're more dangerous or more criminal or whatever excuse this country wants to reach for. It's colonialism, still doing exactly what it was built to do. Residential schools, broken child welfare systems, poverty, generations of trauma. This country has never actually invested in healing. All of it funneling our women straight into cells. And here's the part that most people don't talk about. This is connected to the crisis of our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's the same root causes, the same systems failing us, and sometimes it's the same woman. She survives one thing only to be swallowed by the other. I know this isn't abstract because I lived it. I was 13 years old the first time I went to jail. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story here. I wrote it out in full because it deserves more than 60 seconds. But I'll tell you this, I made it out. So many of our women that I met along the way didn't. And some of them I can still name. Some of them I've had to grieve. This country has known about this crisis for years. Commissions have named it. Inquiries have named it. And the numbers keep climbing anyway. I wrote about my own story, the women I lost, and what's actually being done and what isn't to fix this. It's up now on Indigenous Insider. Links in my bio. Go read it. Hi.
That's Brandy Morin. You can find her on TikTok. And I'm going to play this. The psychiatrists talk about the psychology of hypersexuality, and again, the money that needs to be in place to help Indigenous people heal from hypersexuality is possible, but yet, like it's that woman that keeps on coming back and being abused over and over again, never healing, and so it's important that people, start to look at healing in a different way, and understanding that it's possible to heal.
Hypersexuality and mental health. Hello, I'm Professor Ahmed Hankir. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and today I want to talk about a topic that isn't discussed nearly enough: hypersexuality. It's a taboo subject, but we need to talk about it because for some people it can have profound consequences. Hypersexuality isn't simply having a high sex drive. It refers to sexual thoughts, urges, or behaviors that become difficult to control and begin causing distress, risk, or significant problems in someone's life. One of the best recognized causes is bipolar disorder. During manic or hypomanic episodes, changes in brain function can lead to increased reward seeking, reduced inhibition, impulsivity, and overconfidence. For some people, this can result in a sudden surge in sexual desire and risky sexual behavior. This might include multiple sexual partners, sex with strangers, compulsive pornography use, compulsive masturbation, spending excessive amounts of money on sexual services, or crossing personal or relationship boundaries. Hypersexuality can also occur in some people with ADHD, certain personality disorders, substance use disorders, and some neurological conditions. Hypersexuality can affect anyone. However, in a disinhibited state, some individuals may become more vulnerable to coercion, exploitation, trauma, or sexual assault. When the episode or period of dysregulation passes, many people are left carrying immense shame, embarrassment, guilt, or confusion. Relationships can break down, careers can be damaged. There may also be risks such as sexually transmitted infections, unplanned pregnancies, financial difficulties, or legal consequences. It's important to say this clearly. Understanding the role of mental illness does not excuse harmful behavior or remove personal responsibility, but it does help us understand why these experiences occur and how we can support recovery without shame or stigma. Treatment depends on the underlying cause. For bipolar disorder, mood stabilizers can be highly effective. Psychological therapies can also help people develop insight, improve impulse control, and reduce risk. If you recognize yourself or someone you love in what I've described, please don't suffer in silence. Honest conversations with a mental health professional can be life-changing. Hypersexuality can sometimes be a symptom of an underlying mental health condition rather than a reflection of someone's values or character. Let's replace shame with understanding, stigma with compassion, and silence with honest conversation. I hope you found that helpful. As always, protect your minds and protect your hearts.
And when I talk about limerence and I talk about the need to have guided, like you really have to have shop around and find a good therapist, one who has boundaries. There are a lot of white women out there who are therapists who do not have healthy boundaries. But that's not to say too that there are white men who are therapists. You have to shop around. You have to understand too that the whole process of being in a relationship with a mental health worker means that you have to work at it. At the same time, too, you have to develop support systems in place to help you regulate your central nervous system, because this is all based on like obtrusive thoughts or vulnerability. Again, when people have been victimized and they become victims of other people and they come out of it with shame. So, like it's one thing to be a victim and have the courage to actually go to court and face your abuser. It's another thing to have support when the person is prosecuted and that you're still in recovery and that support needs to help you regulate your central nervous system. There'll be relapse and recovery coming out throughout your life in months, years, weeks, decades. But the reality of it is every 10 years, our identity changes. Our how we see ourselves and how we interact with other people is vitally important. My whole point on the podcast as an Indigenous woman is to say to women, non-Indigenous women, stop pointing the finger at Indigenous women as being hypersexual, or that we are, as Brandy Morin says, that there's something the matter with us. This has been systemic. Like I said, the first 100 years of colonization, they killed 5 generations of our children. And even how they looked for women who were pregnant, gutted their bellies and took their baby's scalp and theirs. They created a town in South Dakota just for that. The whole systemic colonial way of thinking of what Indigenous women are. Now, the fact that as Indigenous women, we have to also look after ourselves, our relatives, and to make sure that they don't become violent and aggressive and just really terrible women. You know, in my community, and I'm just finishing this off, is, and again, in Indigenous First Nations, Inuit communities, when women have married into our communities, because of this colonial construct, they're very aggressive, very manipulative, gaslighting, and they continue that throughout their lives. They are more demanding to leadership in getting things done than the women and the young men who've actually grown up here in our communities. So for me, I'm talking from experience, and this is my own personal opinion. I'm 74. What have I got to lose? Like, you know, people can look at me and I'll say, look and see what I have. But then you look at somebody who's been married in, and even when they were married in at 14, 15, 16, and you wonder, okay, how is this trafficked? Was this person trafficked? So this whole dichotomy of colonization and how the Indian Act has polarized Indigenous women from different communities, and how we perceive what mental health and what hypersexuality is or isn't. This whole colonial construct of like being the Virgin Mary is an impossible goal to achieve. But the realistic goal is to just be able to have open conversation with another human being. So with that, I hope I've given you some more insight. But like different things on TikTok really trigger me to use them in my podcast. And again, my life is constantly changing. When I first came back from Nevada, I had given up some friends, and the ones who made the effort to contact me again have. And that's just the way life is. But there's also a give and take too. The white woman that I depended on so much has ghosted me. And the white man that I traveled with to Las Vegas, like, he's struggling. You know, has to maintain his livelihood and do what he needs to do to, live the best life he can. But I do want to, encourage people to know that there are people. One of the psychologists with her PhD in eliminating self-defeating behavior had said, you'll find invisible helping hands. And so this white man, in my podcast, and what I've been talking about in terms of healthy human sexuality, is an invisible helping hand. And we will meet all these different people throughout our life, right until it's time to go home and our bodies are placed in burial site. We are living the best life we can. So with that, take comfort in knowing there are invisible helping hands helping you guide your way through this life. We are not alone. Even though we may live alone and not have a partner, we are never alone.